Hello, I'm Esther Gidou-Ewart. It's Monday, January 10th. This is Africa 54.
Private companies step in to encourage South Africans to get the COVID vaccine. West African nations slap tough sanctions on Mali over their election delay. And a big win for Cameroon at the African Cup of Nations.
We begin with deadly flooding in South Africa. At least 10 people have been killed in flooding around South Africa's eastern coastal city of East London. Hundreds more are homeless after the weekend, according to national media reports. Rivers burst their banks and roads were inundated with rising waters. Video airing on state broadcasters SABC showed cars trying to drive through torrents of water that had submerged highways. Several media reported that hundreds of homes had been washed away in the iron roof informal settlements just outside the city, especially the Mdansane township. Scientists suspect that climate change is the cause of worsening floods and droughts along the country's eastern coastline, where the 500,000 inhabitants of East London live. South Africa has the highest number of COVID infections on the continent, and nearly 2 years into the pandemic, fewer than half of the country's adults have been vaccinated. The South African government has been reluctant to order vaccine mandates, but private companies are stepping in to encourage people to get the much-needed shot. Linda Giftash reports from Johannesburg.
Thousands of COVID-19 vaccination sites have opened across South Africa, but the flow of patients has stalled. From the peak of over 1 million vaccines administered in 1 week in August, numbers have plummeted to under 150,000 last week. The decline comes as the country fell far short of government targets to inoculate 67% of the population by the end of 2021. The manager of the Parkhurst Clinic in Johannesburg says dispelling misinformation could encourage more people to get their shots.
Providing more health education to our community, or why vaccinate, what is the importance of vaccinations. Giving more information will assist, will reduce those kinds of resistance and myths about the vaccine.
Companies are taking steps beyond public education. Discovery is the largest private health insurer in South Africa. The company encouraged vaccination of its clients by offering rewards points and cashback on life insurance premiums. In September, Discovery also mandated its 11,000 employees be vaccinated, and the policy worked. Staff vaccination rates jumped from 22% to 94% within 3 months.
Discovery is well versed and has done extensive work over the years around behavioral psychology and incentives and rewards for getting people to behave in particular ways and supporting those behavioral changes. But those behavioral changes only get you to a certain point. But once you start getting to the 70% thresholds, you need firmer levers to get people over the finish line.
Whelan said employees overwhelmingly welcomed the mandate and the reassurance it brings for going back to work. But he said 2 to 3% of employees have remained resistant. As more companies introduce similar policies, legal battles have been raised arguing it infringes on individual rights. The country is still waiting to see how the courts will rule on the issue.
We know from previous cases during the pandemic that these competing community rights to life and health weigh extremely heavily and can warrant the infringement of individual rights in certain situations, but particularly in the context of a pandemic as serious as COVID-19. So it is very likely that vaccine mandates will be found to be constitutional in South Africa.
Without faster uptake, the country's hard-won vaccine supply will expire. In November, the government asked Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer, as well as the U.S. government, to delay sending more vials. The same month, President Cyril Ramaphosa warned widespread mandates were being considered.
We've reached a point where our supply of vaccines outstrips the demand for them. So we need to get that demand back up so that we ensure that all the vaccines we have at our disposal are utilized and that we reach that goal of population-level immunity.
She says mandates can play a strong role in increasing vaccination rates if other barriers like transportation to clinics and time off work are tackled as well. Linda Giftash for VOA News, Johannesburg.
Uganda ended the world's longest school closure on Monday, ordering millions of students back to the classroom nearly 2 years after learning was suspended because of the coronavirus pandemic. Education Minister John Muyingo says all primary and secondary students are automatically resuming classes a year above where they left off. Students poured through the school gates that had been shuttered since March 2020 when COVID-19 swept the globe, greeting teachers and friends after 83 weeks outside the classroom. Remote learning was available only for the privileged few during Uganda's school closures. Richard Aburo, deputy head at Nakasero Primary School, says schools and students fared differently during closures, but those in rural and poorer settings had been hard hit.
Schools that are within the city or within the towns, some of them had the opportunity maybe to get some study materials. And they did something for some time, but when it is not well supervised still, you'll find that they might have studied, but not to the best of their ability. With the schools up country, some of them did not study anything completely.
The closures affected at least 10 million primary and secondary students, according to the United Nations Education and Cultural Body. Children's rights groups had criticized the extreme length of the shutdown, warning that closures had far-reaching consequences for learning and put vulnerable students at higher risk of child marriage or forced labor. Sudanese security forces fired tear gas Sunday at thousands of activists protesting against the country's military rulers, according to the 3 witnesses in major cities. Thousands of demonstrators marched from Omdurman to Bahri, 2 cities adjoining the capital Khartoum, chanting slogans denouncing military leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who seized power in a coup on October 25th that appended a transitional power-sharing deal with civilians. Separate protests were held in Khartoum and other cities in other regions of Sudan. A Sudanese Doctors Association aligned with the protest movement says 1 man was killed after being hit in the neck by a tear gas canister. The Tigray People's Liberation Front, the party that controls most of the northern Ethiopia region of Tigray, on Sunday accused Eritrea of attacking its troops. Reuters says it could not verify the alleged attack as the communication network is down in the area. Eritrean Information Minister Yemane Gebremeskel did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Ethiopia's military spokesman, Colonel Getnet Adane, and government spokesman Legesse Tulu also did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's spokeswoman, Bilene Seyum, has also not responded to a request for comment. Meanwhile, the UN Agency for Humanitarian Affairs says aid organizations are suspending their operations in an area of northwest Tigray, where 56 civilians were killed by an airstrike over the weekend. The Economic Community of West African States says it will impose tough sanctions on Mali with immediate effect over a delay in holding elections. Olivia Chan has the story.
West African nations have significantly hardened their stance over Mali in what the region's 15-member bloc said was a response to an unacceptable delay in holding elections.
On democracy and good governance.
Following a 2020 military coup, Mali's interim authorities at the end of last year proposed holding elections in December 2025.
Ahead of the Malian transition.
That's instead of February this year as originally agreed with the Economic Community of West African States. After an emergency summit, ECOWAS said on Sunday it would close its members' borders with Mali, sever diplomatic ties and impose tough economic sanctions. Regional Monetary Union, UEMOA, has instructed all financial institutions under its umbrella to suspend Mali with immediate effect, severing the country's access to regional financial markets. Burkinabe President Roch Kabore.
As much as we are aware of the complex situation of the country,
autant nous pensons que toutes les réformes politiques
We think that all political, economical and social reforms looking to reshape Mali can only be headed by democratically elected authorities.
Démocratiquement élus.
Dans les heures à venir.
A statement on Malian state television in the early hours of Monday called the sanctions illegal and illegitimate.
Le gouvernement du Mali déplore le caractère inhumain.
The interim government has vowed to close its side of the border with ECOWAS member states, recall its ambassadors, and reserve the right to reconsider its memberships of ECOWAS and UEMOA. Mali has previously blamed the election delay on the challenge of organizing a democratically robust vote amid a violent Islamist insurgency.
That was Olivia Chan of Reuters reporting. U.S. and Russian officials are meeting this week to address the tensions along the Russian-Ukrainian border. VOA's Michelle Quinn reports.
The tense situation in Ukraine, with as many as 100,000 Russian troops near the Russian-Ukrainian border, will be the topic of discussion this week in Geneva as U.S. and Russian officials meet. The situation, which has been brewing for years, escalated in recent weeks with the troop buildup. Russia has denied it plans to invade its neighbor and demanded that NATO forces pull back from Eastern Europe as part of security guarantees. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said there is room for negotiation. Reducing American troops in the region is not on the table, but he said other issues are, such as reviving a treaty that placed mutual limits on where troops can be deployed and conduct exercises. Blinken, however, added there would likely be no breakthroughs in the first talks, given what is happening on the ground.
To make actual progress, it's very hard to see that happening when there's an ongoing escalation, when Russia has a gun to the head of Ukraine with 100,000 troops near its borders, the possibility of doubling that on very short order.
Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Ryabkov, told Russian news agencies Sunday that there might not be much progress in the talks because the United States lacks an understanding of Russia's security concerns. Since Russia crossed Ukraine's border and annexed Crimea 8 years ago, tensions between Moscow and Kyiv have been high. Ukraine is a former Soviet republic, while a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine called on the U.S. to send more troops to the Eastern European nation. Republican Senator Mike Rounds said he supports the Biden administration's efforts to find a diplomatic solution with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
And I think sending a message to Mr. Putin that he's going to get a lot more accomplished using diplomatic means rather than threatening to invade is something that we should be very, very firm about.
Secretary Blinken said there are principles bigger than Ukraine in play, such as not allowing one nation to change borders by force or to subjugate its neighbors.
That's why it's so important that we stand not only for Ukraine's territorial integrity, its sovereignty, its independence, but for these basic principles.
After officials meet in Geneva, they are expected to continue talks this week in Brussels and Vienna. Michelle Quinn, VOA News.
Following the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan, hundreds of thousands of Afghans have sought sanctuary and resettlement in the United States. But now that they are here, some families in Wisconsin's two largest cities are having trouble finding a place to live. Nukbat Malik reports from Wisconsin.
Approximately 10,000 Afghan refugees who arrived in the United States are being temporarily housed at Fort McCoy, a Wisconsin military base. Authorities are trying to find them more permanent homes, and about 900 people will be resettled in Wisconsin in 6 different locations, including Milwaukee and Madison. In September and October, several Milwaukee-based humanitarian organizations and a group of Muslim women paid a special visit to Fort McCoy, which was closed to the media. Sheila Badawan of the Hanan Refugee Relief Group, a community organization that works with resettlement agencies, was among them. She says that in an unusual process, refugees are increasingly being handed over to aid organizations and relocation agencies.
So it's not the normal program that is used for refugee resettlement. And so that's been, a strain, I think, on not just, community organizations that work with, but also really the resettlement agencies, across the board.
These organizations must first locate a good home for the refugees. But these refugees who have a different status from others who have been given asylum do not have as many resources available to them, and that's impeding the resettlement process in Milwaukee and Madison.
The vast majority of them have the title of parolee, which means that after they've been here about a year, they have to actually ask for asylum. And the asylum process is really a horrendous process. It's a very difficult process.
Jewish Social Services, a non-governmental organization based in Madison, is prepared to welcome 75 Afghan refugees, but resettling newly arrived refugees can be challenging.
They don't have any of those things that landlords typically do require and ask about on application. We don't sign leases for people. We help them to sign their own leases. So that requires landlords to be flexible in that way.
At this point, we need housing. And so it could be all parts of Milwaukee, different parts of the region that has available housing so that we can place these individuals.
But finding the right rental properties is difficult. Agencies need a home that not only meets the family's needs, but also does not financially strain them.
Milwaukee is a city that has a shortage of housing, especially affordable housing. A lot of the families coming in are very large families, meaning that they may need something more than a 3-bedroom. There's a limited amount of 3 bedrooms, limited amount of houses within an affordable price range.
So what we're doing this time around is that we are securing apartments, any apartment that we can, and we're securing it ahead of time to be able to place people in when they do arrive rather quickly. That presents a financial challenge for our agencies.
In Wisconsin, some private rental services like Airbnb are trying to help. They are working to connect resettlement agencies with people who can provide some of these families with inexpensive lodging. Nukhbat Malik, VOA News, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, the life and legacy of Sidney Poitier, who broke through racial barriers to become the first black man to win an Oscar. But first, Haiti Adams will tell us what's on tap for Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we'll take a look at informal housing and unplanned communities. Is there a place for them in big urban centers? We'll look at what the mayor of Freetown, Sierra Leone is doing, how she's bringing changes to her city, including its unplanned communities. We'll also talk to a Nigerian American who's making a big difference in affordable housing in Washington, D.C. Join me, Haiti Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Cameroon's win on Sunday in the opening match of the Africa Cup of Nations was met with fireworks and dancing in the capital Yaoundé. The soccer tournament's hosts came from behind to win against Burkina Faso. David Doyle has the details.
Celebrations exploded in Yaoundé on Sunday after Cameroon came from behind to win the opening match of the Africa Cup of Nations. The continent's top soccer tournament kicked off with a clash between the hosts and Burkina Faso. ASC Orléans was among those partying outside the capital's Olembe Stadium.
It's a joy and a satisfaction for us to win the 3 first points. It's an honour for us to organise this AFCON after so many years. And if Cameroon wins, we all have to be proud. I'm really happy. I can't express it.
And though the crowds were raucous after the match, in the 24th minute, Cameroon supporters had been silenced. Midfielder Gustavo Sangare finishing with his left foot at the back post to give Burkina Faso a surprise lead. But the visitors also gave away 2 penalties late in the first half, both tucked away by Cameroonian striker Vincent Aboubakar. Burkina Faso was without its coach and 6 players who had tested positive amid the global health crisis. The other Group A encounter on Sunday was between Ethiopia and Cape Verde, with the latter winning 1-0.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. Whether you are looking to fly through the air with the greatest of ease, explore the aerial arts, or just raise your spirits, the Trapeze School here in Washington, D.C. will make sure things are looking up. Maxim Moskalkov visited the school and met its many instructors.
Flying trapeze and trampoline jumping, Spanish web and juggling, aerial arts and lyra. The Trapeze School in Washington, the only such venue in the capital, is happy to work with anyone, regardless of athletic background, fitness level, or age.
In DC, we have a lot of people who are doing circus recreationally. They're not necessarily aiming to become professionals.
But even though most students at the Trapeze School are here for fun, they keep coming back to learn more.
Circus and aerial arts, trampoline, flying trapeze, all of it is about learning something new and finding joy in learning something new.
The youngest student at the Trapeze School is only 6 years old, the oldest over 80. And seeing older people on a flying trapeze here is not at all a rare occasion.
Someone might say, come to class and say, oh, I could never do that. I could never hang from my knees on the trapeze. I could never do a backflip. I've never done one in my life. And the really interesting thing about trapeze is that people very regularly exceed their own expectations.
Flying trapeze doesn't require any specific preparation. Even if a student has never been to a gym, they can come here and do great, say the school instructors.
Well, apart from staying fit, staying busy, staying active, and engaged and entertained, trapeze is a great way to build skills for other areas in your life, be it listening and following directions and instructions. It helps with other skills as well as hand-eye coordination and any other things that you might be doing, like diving, dancing. The list goes on.
For over a year, the Trapeze School has been working together with a nonprofit called Serve Your City, which helps children from low-income families. These kids can get free lessons at the Trapeze School. Washington resident Joy Birth brings her children, Jolia and Josiah, here on a regular basis.
This class taught me about body control, balance, and relaxing my body. I learned how to go up in the air. I could jump higher on the trampoline, and it's a really fun experience because I really like to go on trampoline.
Jana Cohen says the school plans to develop its charity initiatives even further to make flying trapeze and aerial arts available to as many people as possible. Maxim Moskalkov for VOA News, Washington.
Sidney Poitier, the acclaimed actor who broke through racial barriers to become the first black man to win an Oscar for his role in Lilies of the Field, died Friday at the age of 94. Clara Frank has more on his life and legacy.
I build a chapel.
Sidney Poitier won his Oscar for Best Actor in Lilies of the Field in 1963. He played a handyman who helps German nuns build a chapel. Born in Miami and raised on a tomato farm in the Bahamas, Poitier struggled against prejudice and succeeded in breaking race barriers in Hollywood.
I got there on my terms.
My terms meant that I would get there if I am accepted as I perceived myself. I was an African-American actor. That was who I was.
Poitier commanded respect as an actor and a civil rights activist, says Richard Craig, professor of communication at George Mason University. Craig spoke to VOA's Penelope Pallou.
I think it's the legacy of who he was as a human being that allowed him to have that ability to navigate Hollywood and the respective producers, writers, and directors that he had to engage and be a part of, let alone the support within the Black acting community that was probably...
In 1967, Poitier starred in 3 films that defined his acting legacy and activism in the civil rights era. In To Sir with Love, he played a teacher at an inner-city school in London who wins the hearts and minds of his troubled white students. In Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, he played a black man invited to meet his white in-laws.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
In the Heat of the Night, he played Virgil Tibbs, a black cop confronting racism during a murder investigation in the white South, says Richard Craig, professor of communication at George Mason University.
We likely do not have a Denzel Washington. We do not likely have a Chadwick Boseman, God rest him. We do not have a cachet of a long list, I shouldn't say a long list, but a good list of certain Black men that have come through Hollywood and tried to perform at a level that demonstrates African-American men can play a wide array of roles. It goes beyond just Black actors. And I think as Black men, whenever I play with people or engage people humorously and playfully, if they say something I don't like, I go to a classic Sidney Poitier line, "You will call me Mr. Tibbs," and just kind of like, you will give me my respect in a way, and using quotes of that nature.
Sidney Poitier has died at the age of 94.
Clara Frank with that report. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.